Hello everyone and welcome back to 15 Min Books. Thank you for tuning in today as we take a deep dive into another Sigmund Freud book. If you have not seen the other one titled The Interpretation of Dreams, I will link it down below. Also make sure to stick out through the end of the video to not miss the key element. Let's not waste more time and dig into the video. An Outline of Psychoanalysis is a seminal work by Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. The book was first published in 1938, shortly before Freud's death, and it provides an overview of his theories and ideas about the human psyche. In this book, Freud introduces the basic concepts of psychoanalysis, such as the role of the unconscious mind, the importance of early childhood experiences, and the mechanisms of defense that people use to cope with emotional conflicts. He also discusses the structure of the psyche, including the ego and superego, and how they interact with one another. Freud uses numerous case studies to illustrate his theories, demonstrating how psychoanalysis can help patients uncover and resolve unconscious conflicts that are causing them psychological distress. He also addresses common criticisms of psychoanalysis and provides his perspective on the limitations and possibilities of this therapeutic approach.
An Outline of Psychoanalysis by Sigmund Freud is divided into three main parts. Part 1, The Psychology of the Unconscious. In this section, Freud introduces the concept of the unconscious mind and its role in human behavior. He explains how the unconscious influences conscious thoughts and behaviors, and how psychoanalysis aims to bring unconscious conflicts and desires to the surface. Part 2, The Ego and the ID. This section focuses on the structure of the psyche, particularly the relationship between the conscious ego, the unconscious ID, and the moralizing superego. Freud discusses the ways in which these three components of the psyche interact, and how they can contribute to psychological distress when they are out of balance. Part 3, Psychoanalysis as a Therapeutic Procedure. In the final section, Freud discusses the practical application of psychoanalysis as a therapeutic approach. He outlines the methods and techniques used in psychoanalysis and provides case studies to illustrate how psychoanalytic therapy can help patients overcome psychological problems and achieve greater self-awareness. Before we dig into the first part, please make sure to leave a like and press the subscribe button down below. Thank you. Let's dive right into the first part, which is titled The Psychology of the Unconscious, and it focuses on the concept of the unconscious mind and its role in human behavior. This section provides an overview of Freud's theory of psychoanalysis, and it lays the foundation for the rest of the book. According to Freud, the Oedipus complex is a natural part of human development that occurs during the phallic stage of psychosexual development, which typically takes place between the ages of 3 and 5. During this stage, children become aware of their sexual desires and develop their gender identity. As children navigate these complex and often conflicting desires, they develop their sense of gender identity and learn to differentiate between appropriate and inappropriate sexual behaviors. If they are able to resolve these conflicts and move past the Oedipus complex, they will be able to form healthy relationships with others and have a stable sense of self. However, if the Oedipus complex is not resolved, Freud believed that it could lead to a range of psychological problems, including anxiety, depression, and difficulty forming healthy relationships. These unresolved conflicts could also lead to the development of neuroses, which Freud believed were the result of repressed desires and conflicts from childhood. Freud begins by explaining that the unconscious mind is a vast reservoir of thoughts, feelings, and impulses that are not accessible to conscious awareness. He argues that these unconscious processes play a crucial role in shaping human behavior, even though we are not aware of them. According to Freud, the unconscious mind is shaped by early childhood experiences, particularly those related to sexuality and aggression. He believes that these experiences can become repressed or pushed out of conscious awareness because they are too disturbing or traumatic to be dealt with at the time. Freud contends that these repressed desires and conflicts continue to influence our behavior, even though we are not aware of them. He explains that they can manifest themselves in various ways, such as in dreams, slips of the tongue, and neurotic symptoms. To uncover these unconscious conflicts, Freud developed the technique of psychoanalysis, which involves free association, dream analysis, and other methods designed to bring unconscious thoughts and feelings to the surface. By doing so, he believed that patients could gain greater insight into their behavior and find ways to resolve their psychological problems. Freud also discusses the concept of the pleasure principle, which he believes governs the workings of the unconscious mind. According to this principle, the unconscious seeks pleasure and avoids pain, and it is driven by impulses related to sexuality and aggression. However, Freud notes that the pleasure principle is often in conflict with the reality principle, which governs conscious behavior. The reality principle involves considering the consequences of our actions and making decisions based on what is socially acceptable and practical. Overall, Part 1 of an outline of psychoanalysis provides a detailed overview of the concept of the unconscious mind and its role in shaping human behavior. Freud's theory of psychoanalysis is based on the idea that uncovering repressed desires and conflicts can lead to greater self-awareness and psychological healing. This section sets the stage for the rest of the book, which focuses on the structure of the psyche and the practical applications of psychoanalysis in therapy. Part 2 of the book is titled The Ego and the ID, and it focuses on the structure of the human psyche. This section builds on the concepts introduced in Part 1, and it delves deeper into the workings of the unconscious mind and its interactions with conscious awareness. Freud argues that the human psyche is composed of three primary components: the ID, the ego, and the superego. The ID is the most primitive and instinctual part of the psyche, representing our basic drives and desires. It operates on the pleasure principle, seeking immediate gratification without concern for consequences. The ego, on the other hand, is the conscious part of the psyche that mediates between the ID and the external world. It is responsible for making decisions based on reality and practicality, rather than pure instinct. The ego operates on the reality principle, balancing the demands of the ID with the constraints of the external environment. Finally, the superego represents our moral and ethical values, as well as our sense of social norms and conventions. It acts as a kind of internalized parental figure, enforcing moral codes and punishing us for violating them. The superego develops through a process of socialization, as we learn to internalize the values of our parents and other authority figures. According to Freud, the interactions between these three components of the psyche are complex and often conflictual. For example, the ID may demand immediate gratification of a desire, while the ego must consider the consequences of that action and may choose to delay gratification. Meanwhile, the superego may be constantly judging and punishing the ego for not living up to moral standards. Freud also introduces the concept of defense mechanisms, which are unconscious strategies that the ego uses to cope with the anxiety and stress caused by conflicts between the ID, ego, and superego. These defense mechanisms include repression, denial, projection, and others. Freud argues that many psychological problems, such as anxiety disorders and neuroses, stem from unresolved conflicts between the ID, ego, and superego. He believes that psychoanalysis can help patients resolve these conflicts and achieve greater balance and integration in their psyches. Overall, Part 2 of an outline of psychoanalysis provides a detailed overview of the structure of the human psyche and the interactions between its various components. Freud's concept of the ID, ego, and superego provides a framework for understanding the internal conflicts that can lead to psychological distress, and his discussion of defense mechanisms helps to explain how the psyche copes with these conflicts. This section sets the stage for Part 3, which focuses on the practical applications of psychoanalysis in therapy. Repetition compulsion is also a concept introduced by Freud to describe the phenomenon where individuals repeat patterns of behavior or experiences that are painful or traumatic. According to Freud, this repetition is driven by unconscious forces and is often seen in individuals who have experienced childhood trauma or other significant psychological distress. Freud believed that repetition compulsion was closely related to the concept of the unconscious, and that it was a way for individuals to try to master or resolve unresolved emotional conflicts from the past. He argued that the unconscious mind had a powerful influence on behavior and that individuals would often repeat patterns of behavior or experiences in an attempt to gain control over their emotions or experiences. One of the key ways in which repetition compulsion manifests is in the repetition of traumatic experiences. For example, an individual who has experienced childhood abuse may find themselves repeatedly drawn to abusive relationships or situations, despite the pain and distress that these experiences cause. Freud also believed that repetition compulsion could be seen in other areas of life, such as in the repetition of patterns of behavior or thought. For example, an individual who has experienced feelings of helplessness or powerlessness in the past may find themselves repeatedly drawn to situations where they feel powerless or unable to control their environment. Part 3 of the book is titled Psychoanalysis as a Therapy, and it focuses on the practical applications of psychoanalysis in the treatment of psychological problems. This section builds on the concepts introduced in Parts 1 and 2, and it outlines the techniques and methods used in psychoanalysis therapy. Freud begins by noting that psychoanalysis is a lengthy and intensive process, often requiring years of therapy to achieve significant results. He also emphasizes the importance of the therapeutic relationship between the analyst and patient, which is based on trust, openness, and empathy. The main technique used in psychoanalysis therapy is free association, which involves allowing the patient to talk about whatever comes to mind, without censorship or self-censorship. This technique is designed to bring unconscious thoughts and feelings to the surface, allowing the patient to gain greater insight into their behavior and motivations. Freud also discusses the use of dream analysis in psychoanalysis therapy. He argues that dreams are a window into the unconscious mind, and that analyzing dream content can reveal important insights into the patient's psychological state. Another key technique used in psychoanalysis therapy is interpretation, which involves the analyst offering explanations and insights into the patient's thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Interpretation is designed to help the patient gain greater understanding of their unconscious processes and resolve conflicts that may be causing psychological distress. Freud also discusses the concept of transference, which is the phenomenon of patients transferring their feelings and attitudes from past relationships onto the therapist. He argues that transference can be a valuable tool in therapy, as it can reveal unresolved conflicts and allow the patient to work through them in a safe and supportive environment. Finally, Freud emphasizes the importance of the patient's willingness to engage in the therapeutic process. He notes that psychoanalysis therapy requires a significant commitment of time and energy, and that patients must be motivated to engage in the process and work towards resolving their psychological problems. Overall, Part 3 of an Outline of Psychoanalysis provides a detailed overview of the techniques and methods used in psychoanalysis therapy. Freud emphasizes the importance of the therapeutic relationship, the use of free association and dream analysis, the role of interpretation, and the concept of transference. This section provides a practical framework for understanding how psychoanalysis therapy works, and it highlights the importance of the patient's willingness to engage in the process in order to achieve positive results. Additionally, I want to talk about another key element in the book. The death drive is a controversial concept introduced by Sigmund Freud. According to Freud, the death drive is an innate, unconscious drive that humans have towards self-destruction and the return to a state of inanimate matter. Freud believed that the death drive was in opposition to the life drive, which is the drive towards self-preservation, reproduction, and the maintenance of a state of homeostasis. The life drive is what motivates us to seek pleasure, form relationships, and pursue our goals and desires. The death drive, on the other hand, is a force that drives us towards self-destruction and the dissolution of our individuality. Freud believed that this drive was a result of the innate tension between our individual desires and the demands of society and the external world. He argued that this tension could lead to a sense of hopelessness and despair, which in turn could lead to a desire for self-destruction. Freud believed that the death drive could manifest in a variety of ways, including through self-destructive behavior, aggression, and the repression of life-sustaining impulses. He also believed that the death drive was a key component of our sexual and erotic desires, and that it could be seen in the desire for domination, submission, and other forms of extreme sexual behavior.
That was it for today. Thank you all so much for sticking throughout the whole video. Please make sure to not miss that like and subscribe button.